Hello, and welcome back to another episode. I'm Veslemø Klaveness Berge, and this is Stories for the Future, a podcast where we try to break some bubbles and build bridges for a better world. Today, I'm talking to Holly Smith, and wow, am I impressed. Holly is one of those people who just makes you wonder how on earth they managed to do so much in such a short time. Holly is only 25 years old, but she's probably done more to shape the future than most people manage in a lifetime. With a background in psychology, not finance, Holly somehow found her way into the world of impact investing, and not just as an observer. She's now based in Singapore, running a purpose-driven venture studio, gathering changemakers over monthly coffee mornings, and, because why not, writing a book to help the rest of us make sense of how money can actually drive positive change. So, if you ever felt like finance isn't for people like you, this episode is your invitation to think again. Let's dive in. Holly, welcome so much to Stories for the Future.
Thank you for having me.
I just have to say, you really impress me. And I think you graduated like 3 years ago with a bachelor in psychology, and now you're an impact investing lead in Singapore. So you have to explain this to us. How does someone with non-finance roots end up in the world of impact investing? And you don't just like dabble in it. To me, it seems like you're really like making a dent. So please explain this to us.
I really enjoy telling people because I guess I enjoy doing things the non-traditional way. I don't fit in many ways, and taking the well-trodden path is not really how I do things. And I like to show people that they can too. Um, so so yeah, I do have a bachelor's of science in psychology. So I studied psychology as a health science.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and I was going down the route of like behavior change. I thought maybe policy, something like that. Because I could see that when it comes to health policy, behavior change and psychology was being utilized at a government level. But what about for our environmental concerns and behaviors that could enhance progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals or reduce harm in the world? Why are we not using psychology as much there? But how did I not pursue policy and end up in impact investing? Well, I'm a self-declared activist. Every day I wake up, I am an activist just by existing in the spaces that I do. And I was quite typical for a woman, and in the West, that my financial literacy was very much kept to budgeting. Like I'm great at budgeting. I knew everything about the difference between, care for the pennies, the pounds look after themselves, and how to diversify my income streams and this kind of thing. But when it came to economics or words like investing or endowment or anything like that, I just thought it was for evil people, for people who are selfish and only cared about being wealthy and exploiting others to achieve that. I had such negative connotations around that world, and it was ignorance, and also I think a kind of a rhetoric that I was exposed to that villainized wealth and anything to do with money, and really championed the struggle and championed grassroots and people that rise from nothing. And activism's about anybody can do anything from wherever you are. Like you use the power that you have, and so I just steered clear of that world a lot. Um, and yet somehow at uni, I launched a zero waste shop, and I started to dabble in the power of the consumer and how that plays a role in supply and demand and the message that you send. Every dollar or pound or peso that you spend casts a vote into the world, the kind of world that you want to see. And slowly, I started to see money as a tool, actually,
Mm-hmm.
and very very specifically a campaign by People and Planet around universities divesting from fossil fuels and the call for Barclays to divest from fossil fuels. 'Cause,
Yeah.
at the time, Barclays were the leading funder of fossil fuels when it comes to banks, and seventh in the world. And if you want the latest, you can look up Banking on Climate Chaos. They release an annual report. I love their work so much. It's a group of NGOs and think tanks that bring all that together. And I was this poster child, like environmental activist for my university and my community. Had this zero waste shop, and oh no, all along I've held a Barclays account, and I felt so
Yeah.
fraudulent, and not just fraudulent, but what was this all for? If
Mm.
actually I was undermining all my effortful work, creating communities, creating awareness, running campaigns, protesting peacefully in the streets and all this kind of thing, when actually my hard-earned money was working against the causes I cared about.
Mm.
Um, and so I shut down my Barclays, and I sent them a letter, and I told them why why I was leaving. And then I was pursuing. Well, okay, I found the bad guy, not just the bad guy, the worst guy. But where can I find a good guy? Where can I find a good
Yeah.
bank account? And that actually proved a lot more tricky. Um, and it was at the time where greenwashing wasn't being regulated by the UK advertising standards yet. It was just kind of coming to light, that kind of conversation. So I didn't know what I could trust when I did read things. Or maybe like Triodos is pretty cool, but at the time, you had to pay for the privilege, and I was just a 20-year-old student. Like
Mm.
I can't afford such a service. And yeah, so I guess what I would call it now is like negative screening and best in class, which are investment principles. So I got rid of the worst one, and just had to settle for the best of what I could find was left,
Mm.
or like the least bad. Um, but it started to open up this big conversation about I can I can put in all this effort to change the world, but actually, and small things do add up. I'm glad that I did so much work in consumer behavior and my personal lifestyle as well as my peers. But what about the bigger picture? And I started to increase my financial literacy and realized, financial literacy and political literacy are actually a tool in my activist toolkit.
Mm.
Not that, if I said before, finance and money is the root of all evil, now I saw it as the root of all change and potential and
Mm.
power. And I didn't think, oh yeah, now's the time to go and get a career in finance. I just fell into it. Which,
Right.
how does one do that without any financial literacy?
Yes. That's my
um,
question.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's because I was looking for solutions that didn't exist for me. So there weren't, whether it's sustainable investing or banks that I could trust what they were saying, or these kind of things, financial services that aligned with my values, I couldn't find, or I couldn't find that were accessible to me. So there were sustainable investment options that had account minimums of £250,000. And to be clear, I did not have that at 20, and nor did I
Mm.
have that to spare, right?
Mm.
Um, or they, I know there are investment apps or accounts where I could go in and I could pick the individual funds or ETFs or stocks. I didn't know how to do that.
No.
So I just knew what I cared about, and yeah, so at some point I was doom scrolling on LinkedIn and thinking about maybe I should consider working in environmental issues rather than volunteering, because I was pursuing this psychology career, and I thought, oh, maybe I'll switch it up. I'll do my well-being, accessibility, advocacy stuff as a volunteering, and then I'll pursue
Mm.
environmental stuff as a career. I'll switch up a bit, see what happens. And I found a fintech startup advertising for internship roles, and they were building an impact investing retail app. I was like, great.
Mm.
You're building what I need, and
Yeah.
you are recruiting for the skills that I have, and that it was just perfect.
Mm.
And I said, I need what you're building. Let me help you build it. And that is very much how I've approached most of my jobs since.
Fantastic.
Yes, yeah. So that's and critically on the finance piece is that I was fortunate that the people that founded that company, what they said to me is that we can teach you everything you need to know about finance. And as you grow, we can support you with in-house like training and where relevant external courses and this kind of thing. But we cannot teach you your passion and your values.
Yeah.
That's we can't teach candidates that. And that's
Mm.
that's the basis upon which they recruited. A drive to learn, a passion and alignment with the company values. And that's why they had great employees. And I think only a handful of people came from finance, and at the peak size, including all the interns, I think we had like 20 to 30 people at one point, which is great for a startup, a fintech startup to have like 4 people from finance. And that made it really a great place and a authentic and um, how to say, like if you want to build an investment thesis for climate action, you need people who understand climate change.
Mm.
If you want it for healthcare inclusion, you need people to understand on the ground what are the barriers to accessing healthcare. Um, Otherwise, your investment thesis is just pulled out of thin air and will not be successful in return, financial return or impact
Yeah.
return. So yeah, that's how I got in. I was an activist that discovered finance as a tool.
Yeah. Fascinating. But how did you then, because you're from the UK, how
Mm.
did you end up in Singapore and why in
Mm.
a way? Not that it's not a nice place to be, but
Yes. So I loved that first company very, very dearly. And there are things that you have to trade off when in the impact space, actually, in general, whether you're building a impactful business, an impactful career, or you're an impact investment fund. You have to make trade-offs at certain points, whether it like let's say for Horizon, how quickly will you make that impact versus how quickly you will make the money back. And so
mm,
sometimes you might prioritize making money back first because you can make greater impact later, or other times you say, okay, but it's so urgent, we need to do impact now, we build the profitability later.
mm,
um, and for that company, there were areas where we had to prioritize return over impact. And that meant our investment portfolio was primarily focused in developed economies. And we all shared the same sentiment that we wanted to reach further. So we had these non-profit partnerships that were based in emerging markets,
mm,
but our actual investment portfolio was in developed economies. And so when that company closed, I still felt very strongly about that I wanted to contribute like my time, my energy, my skills, my young and most energetic years with most tolerance to volatility and change because I have no
mm,
responsibilities in
mm,
terms of like family or mortgages or anything.
mm,
I wanted to contribute to places that could feel it the most. Um, yeah, I decided to export my education, skills, and privilege out of Europe and out of the West. Um, But before I landed somewhere, I wanted to make sure I had contextual understanding. So I took my savings and my backpack, and I lived in South and Southeast Asia for 1 year, just over 1 year actually. Um, and I had three main missions. One, to see where my friends called home, because I grew up with a lot of South Asian friends and family, and some of them are first generation, some second. Some people are just people that I've met along my life somehow, but I've always met them in my home context, and I wanted to meet them in their home context. Particularly South Asia, right? There's a historical relationship between Britain and South Asia,
Yeah. Right.
and I feel it's really important to see that for myself, and that was one of my second goals, which was to decolonize my mindset. I'm very aware that I grew up in the British education system where the Commonwealth is taught like it was a happy family in year 6, and then we never speak about it again, and it's only through like online or when you get to university that even the word like colonialism or the decolonization movement came to me. And I grew up with South Asian friends, and how could I have not known about that my whole life? So that was the second mission, was to really dig deep and explore that. And the third one was to see what sustainable development, and I put air quotes around that, sustainable development looks like in South and Southeast Asia, and and so that when I got into rooms again with money or power or proximity to money and power, I could advocate or speak from like lived experience, or I could put them in touch with people who are on the ground who can actually say it better than I can, rather than just saying what I think they might need in that country. If we're going to invest in like gender equality in South Asia, I can say, hey, like I actually explored that whilst I was there, and these are some of the things that came up. I'd love to put you in touch with some of the women that I met or the organizations that I know that are doing that. And it was really confronting and really tiring, and um, I learned how to truly listen, uh,
Yeah.
really, really, truly, and not just I'm going to this country to learn about this issue. It's I'm going here and I'm just going to observe and I'm going to listen,
Right.
and where
Right.
appropriate, I'm going to support. Like I did pro bono work and volunteering, but sometimes it was not appropriate for me to be involved in any way. Actually, my power for those contexts is what I do next, rather than what I could do there. Um, and yeah, and so after a year, it was about time I got a job again, um, and do something with this year of education. And I knew I wanted to stay in Asia, and Singapore is ideal, because of the proximity to impact, but it's a financial hub. A lot
Yeah.
of companies and investment firms have their Asia base there, or it's there or Hong Kong. And it's so small and so young that it wasn't really that long ago that it was a fishing village, you know. So convincing people that it's worthwhile to invest in Thailand, like Indonesia, the Philippines. Not only is the ASEAN familial tie there, the history is there, people's families are already there, but also the issues faced by the neighboring countries either previously were felt or are still felt by Singapore. We share oceans with Indonesia. We have the same plastic pollution. So,
Yes.
there's things like this, and it is a really tough job market, and visas are really, really challenging. But I felt like, okay, next step, let's try there. It seems to be the place to go with all this experience I've just had.
Right. So now you work for a company called XQ,
Mm,
right?
mm.
So what is it that you do there? And also I would love to hear about this in impact investing morning coffees that you
Mm.
lead there. What is it, and what does your work? Yeah, how does it look today?
Yes, so Xcube is a venture studio. So, put simply, it builds startups, it builds companies. And, there are venture studios that do all sorts of things.
So
Um,
it's not only a focus on impact, right? Or
well,
like impact investing. How is that?
what I really value about Xcube is that they mean what they say and they take it
Mm-hmm.
seriously. So, the company slogan is building ideas that elevate humanity. That
Right.
is impact. That is impact.
Yes. Yeah.
But how do you preserve that as a company mission? How do you preserve that for years to come? How do you
Mm.
embed that in your practices? Um, well, it's impact investing essentially.
Mm.
It's venturing for impact. So the companies we build, they have to have an impact mission and be profitable. Fundamentally, have to be profitable. This is not some sort of NGO program churn out situation.
Mm.
That we are building things that are changing whatever area of impact they're trying to improve. But yeah, but they're driving impact. So my role there ranges from the venture level, the company level. How do we build a venture strategy that generates impact, um, and has a profitable business model? And what does that look like? Well, how do we know that a, a company like a fintech or a regtech or something for financial inclusion is actually going to be adopted by the people that we want to include in the financial system? The idea
Mm.
market fit has to be strong. Otherwise, we're just noble people with good
Mm.
ideas thinking we're going to help these, disenfranchised communities from our little bubble in the,
Mm.
privileged Singapore studio. Like you have to be in conversation with the end users. So those are the kind of things we're thinking about when we're building. But then also at a portfolio level. So I build the impact investment thesis. So what's the problem? What are the solutions? What do experts say are the solutions? And how do we make those investable? Because sometimes
Mm.
solutions are multi-stakeholder, right? Like it requires governments to do something, or corporations, this kind of thing. But where do we sit in that, and how can we make things investable, and how can we invest in them as well? And then how do we measure it? The impact measurement and management,
Yes.
and how do we integrate that into our decision making?
Mm.
Um, and yeah, that whole end to end, I love it, and I really respect that they brought me in for it. That's They mean what they say, and so they got someone in who's going to legitimize what they want to do.
Mm.
And I think it's a really exciting space where impact investing and corporate venturing have a real opportunity to address the funding and financing gap for the SDGs, because we need private capital. We need more private
Mm.
capital moving towards the SDGs. We're not short for startups coming up with ideas, but we're struggling with startups dying off in 2 to 4 years' time because the funding models
Exactly.
aren't right for them, or
Yeah.
mojo runs out, or it's
Mm.
a Western startup that's trying to solve a Southeast Asian problem and no one's ever
Mm.
like stepped foot there.
Mm.
All sorts of reasons why startups are
Mm.
struggling, but it's not for lack of good ideas. Um, so I'm really enjoying this. It's slightly different than things I've done before, but I really enjoy what I get to do there. And yeah, it's a model that can really accelerate impact development.
Mm. So is that this morning coffees, is that also through that company, or is that something that you've started yourself?
Yeah, so the coffee mornings were an idea that I I floated. I have a part-time side gig, which I'll also give shout out to them, which is Lend for Good,
Mm.
a crowd lending platform, for impact. They do impact loans. And
Mm.
I floated it to them. I said, "Oh, hey, like I'm thinking maybe I'll start an impact investing coffee group. in Singapore. And at an event they hosted in Singapore, Tom Dawkins gave it a shout out. And I'd only told them 1 hour before that I'd had this idea, and it was the first time I said it out loud. And he was just like, "Well, no time like the present." So it kicked off there, and I say thank you to Tom and Len for Good for giving it a shout out at their event, and also thanks to XQ for sponsoring the first one to get it off the ground. And they've both been real champions of it since. But it all starts with a WhatsApp group.
Right.
And we have 100 members in the WhatsApp group, and I have quite like strict rules. No spam, no pitching, impact investing only. So it's not like Singapore has so many sustainable finance like groups, events, and they're full of spam, and I really struggle to find ones that actually make time for impact investing and not just talk about ESG all the time. And I think that's just part of the market's growth. Like Singapore's literacy in sustainable finance is increasing and improving. And I decided, well, I'm going to accelerate that for impact investing. So yeah, we have a monthly meetup. Again, I say they're like rules, but it's more values that I want to instill. So the coffee mornings, I do give like a loose theme to try and bring the right people to the right room, because not everyone attends every time. But if people came because they want to talk about impact return trade-off, or they want to talk about how to speak between investee and investor and the expectations from each other for measuring and communicating impact and this kind of thing, well, then they'll turn up and get to speak to each other. Sometimes the conversation is hard to control, and the theme the theme is abandoned. But I really I make it clear that this you need to leave the coffee morning having felt that it's added value to your life, that you've met at least one person that you want to have a one-to-one coffee with afterwards, because they could be a potential partner, they could help your professional growth, they could be a client. So it's not never pitch, it's just don't come here to pitch.
Yeah.
And I I want to build and enhance the impact investing ecosystem here, because we spend so much time with our heads down, trying so hard to get it right, to figure out how do we do this? How do we do this for the Southeast Asian context when all our venture capital models are imported from the West? How do I figure this out? Well, if I looked up and looked around, I'd find out that the legend of higher education impact measurement actually is across the table from me. And
Right.
she's worked for 20 years in this, and she is the go-to person. So now I have chats with her about impact measurement frameworks and how to navigate between large institutions versus a tiny enterprise, and how to tailor your impact report to reflect that. And yeah, so I really it's been going for 7 months, I think, 7, 8 months, and yeah, every time now it's max 20 at the coffee morning. It's oversubscribed. I had to start with the Luma event management
Oh,
to
wow.
organize a wait list. But it's really awesome, and I love what happens there, and people respect it, and yeah, get the value that they want out of it. So yeah, I
Fantastic.
love it.
So would you say that, because my next question is a bit tied to this. So my question is, what type of people come to these events? And would you say that there are also people coming that are not necessarily into impact investing in the first place? They are more curious, like I'm just using myself as an example, who thinks that when I hear the word investing, it's either, like you touched on in the beginning, I think of real, like big wealth, or the experts. So what kind of people do they attract? And yeah, how can you attract people who are kind of a bit scared of the word?
Mm, mm. Yeah, I definitely am very welcoming of people who are curious. I
Mm,
I understand with the themes, sometimes I use industry terms, which
yeah.
it's so that sometimes maybe that session is more for the professionals
Mm,
that want to come in and network with each other. But other times it's more open house style, learn about X, impact investing for everyday people kind of style,
mm,
because that's how I got in, right?
yeah.
And I spend a lot of time speaking to students, or I haven't written for a while, but I used to write for Sustainability for Students, their finance articles, which is digesting finance for environmentalists, how to show them what is
Mm,
out there, because that's where I was. That's how I came in. So when people say they want to democratize impact investing, I see that as not just making it easier and more accessible and the right shape and size for people who need to be invested in, like the small businesses or startups, but also the individual retail investor, the everyday person, you and me, not
mm,
just the account minimums, like the ticket size to participate, but also making it easier for us to understand. Because I'm not qualified to be a fund manager. I
mm,
couldn't do that, but I do understand impact investing, and I can see now what words I didn't know before in the finance world. I can name examples of companies that conduct impact investment that way.
right.
And I can make it a real world tangible example, and I can point across my network and say, hey, that person over there does things like that. Or
Mm,
um, yeah, I translate it to impact driven people, how it makes sense.
mm,
So yeah, the group, I actually recently did a poll to find out who's in the group since it first was created. And there are a lot of people in finance and philanthropy, mostly not working in impact investing, but they are trying to carve out a pool of money in their existing role to put towards impact
mm,
investing. Or maybe it's a foundation that wants to learn more about the impact measurement and management side of things, or actually they want to engage with impact investing to increase their pool of money. So whatever returns they get, they just put back into another initiative. So it's still technically philanthropy, because they're donating and giving everything
right.
away and not getting a return as a
Yeah.
foundation. But they're kind of capacity building their pool of money in a way.
Mm,
But then there are consultants, so people who either consult firms, impact funds, or they're consulting the businesses that how to make their business more impactful, or the other way around, people who started with a project, how to turn it into a commercial option. Then there's students, career
mm,
changers, people
right.
who don't want a career in it, aren't a student, but they have a financial advisor and they want to know how to tell them, this is what I
Yeah.
want, please.
Yeah.
There's academics as well. Yeah, it's valuable to have a range of people.
Mm,
Um, so I do like that. And there's actually a few people who um, have learned about impact investing, and it resonates with their lifestyle approach, which is something I've spoken about before. And they look at that. So a freelance marketer who looks at her entire portfolio, and there are some items that are fully pro bono and some things that are fully for money, but she wants to increase that middle section where things are for impact
mm,
and are making her money.
mm,
And
mm.
she's starting to resonate with the impact investing approach, where you put a value on both, you measure both. um, and so yeah, they're coming for the philosophy of impact
Yes.
investing, which I appreciate.
Very interesting. So, yeah, if I was in Singapore, I would definitely be on the wait list. But so I think I read somewhere that you're thinking of maybe writing a book for
Mm.
like activists who want to think like this, and I welcome that. Really. Is it like a serious idea you
Yeah,
have?
it is. I mean, it started with an article, and
Yeah.
I've written the article a couple times, improved it, done it for different audiences, and actually, I have so much to say about the so the article was 10 tools of a financial activist,
Mm,
and it's exactly the growth journey that I described earlier, where I went
mm,
from I had charity subscriptions, so I had my donation. I ran clothes swaps, so I opted out of fast fashion and I bought from charity shops, but I also swapped my clothes. Or I grew up in a village, so sometimes money didn't exist. We just swapped apples for pears. I
nice.
brought a bag of apples into school, and I brought home a bag of pears from my friend who had a great
Yeah.
pear tree. That's so those are the kind of things, but it develops to boycotts. Maybe you
Mm,
boycott a brand or you boycott an industry. Like I will never work for oil and gas.
mm,
That's my hard line.
mm,
But how far I trace into my paycheck, well, there's only so much I can do about that. Like I work in
mm.
tech, so there's only so much I can really divest from that. But I've decided I'm going
Yeah.
to boycott the industry. They will never be directly paying my salary. Um,
Right.
and thinking about later, more advanced things like investment, divestment, active ownership, or shareholder advocacy, whichever way you call it. And yeah, thinking about those things. And I just talk so much about this all the time to people.
Mm,
And yeah, for a while, I felt a book brewing inside me, but I didn't
mm,
know. I've got a lot of ideas. I've got 3 book ideas that I want to do, but this is the one that is the most ready and the one that I'm most informed about. And yeah, so that's essentially what it will be is a book version of that article, and I want it to be for normal people. So I'll
mm.
probably will have to step away from the word activist and financial.
Yeah. Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, because the best financial activism books already out there uh, don't mention those 2 words at all.
Right.
Um, yeah, even within, change makers and people who live according to their values, the word activist can be quite emotionally charged.
Mm,
And, I think about when I was an activist, how I felt about the word financial or
mm,
finance versus money. One feels very easy to understand, and the other one seems
mm,
really complex and scary. So, I'll think about how to
mm,
how to frame it, but I am really serious about it, and I have mentors and for each chapter that have said they would willingly like review the chapter because there's somebody who has worked in that specific area, or I've collected consent from people who work in that have projects or companies that I want to use as examples of how. Right,
yeah.
it's not just me harping on about things. I want people to finish that chapter and go, huh, okay, I've got a value about, I don't know, like maybe it's animal cruelty. They don't want to buy products that contribute to animal cruelty, or they don't want to invest in companies that do that. But how do they how do they use that tool for that value?
Mm,
Well, there should be a list or a few case studies or examples.
yeah.
So yeah, I am really serious about it. I just need to prioritize it. But it's hard
Yes.
because I I
Yeah,
work
I
really
know.
hard.
As you
But
said before we started, there are not enough hours in the day.
yes, yeah, never enough hours in the day.
No.
But yeah, I had a lot of I guess it is imposter syndrome about who am I to write a book. Like even writing articles or LinkedIn posts, sometimes I'm like, what am I doing? I'm
Mm,
25. Why am I telling people about these things? But the things that I write about or the things that I've got to say, I'm not hearing other people say them, or
no.
I'm not hearing them say it outside of our spaces. And
Exactly.
I think that's something that I've taken from studying psychology. Everything we learn in psychology, everything we research and we discover, we translate it into understandable terms and we communicate it to people. Otherwise,
Mm.
what is the point in discovering, oh, this behavior is really harmful to our health, or this behavior combined with this environmental cue actually will help people quit smoking, and it's revolutionary and it has far higher success rates than anything else. We don't keep it to ourselves. And that's how I feel about impact investing and all this stuff that I learn, and the things that I learn about how even Southeast Asia and South Asia works, and all these people who are on a very noble mission to, move their career here like I did, but they can be ignorant and harmful. I feel really passionately about sharing these learnings, because otherwise,
Mm.
what's the point in having learnt it? I'm not.
Yeah.
I guess so. There's a tenet in impact investing called like additionality and investor contribution,
Mm-hmm.
and it's about, would this impact have existed without you having invested in it? That's the
Mm.
additionality. But the investor contribution is, aside from money, what are you doing to advance this
Yeah.
impact? So, aside from me working in impact investing, my investor contribution, my additionality is, the network building and capacity building with the coffee mornings, but
Mm.
also this education piece, and making it simple for people to understand and talking about it. So I use that when I'm feeling about the imposter syndrome. I go to myself, well, is anybody else going to write this book?
Yeah.
No.
No, and I think this is exactly why I should do it, because you come from you're not the typical finance investment dude,
Yeah,
so to
yeah,
speak.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
so people can relate, and I think that is so important. So you can speak to normal people, in air quotes, people like me. So yeah, you should definitely not have imposter syndrome. I know we all have it, so it's
Mm,
normal. But yeah, I just welcome everything you write about this. So keep going, please.
thank you.
So yeah, and okay. I think we spoke about this a little bit before, and I think it's like I usually say these days that it's kind of a hurricane outside, so we have to talk about weather. It's kind of these times that we're living in. Um, that was an image, by the way, the hurricane. So, but with all the political division, the economic unrest, all the things happening in the world, how do you see this work that you're doing, or maybe also impact investing in general, playing a role to maybe bridge some of those divides or help us forward in a positive way?
Mm, mm. Yeah. Sometimes when we move in the impact circle, we can get into a really feel good space, a really positive, and I don't mean impact investing, I just mean in the impact space, like
Mm,
people who are trying to do good in the world. And we know that if we look anywhere else, we can find the negative. And so we create all these spaces where we're championing all these cool things. There's whole like news outlets dedicated to positive climate news or positive anything. I think one
mm,
one magazine's called Happyful, which is mental health related, but it's the same kind of concept.
mm,
Um, but as an activist, I like to see actually what the reality is, and what more I can do, but not just more, but where. Like where actually is
mm,
my energy needed? And yes, when big things happen that affect people I know as well as people I don't know across the world, it can be really overwhelming. And particularly when you're just a little fish and you're just lots of little fishies, and somebody somebody caused a big wave, and
yeah.
we're all scrabbling together. But um, I am very much a power to the people person, and a big believer in the little things add up, but also um, uh, I remember this visual, and it was a few years ago, about elections, people who don't vote,
Mm.
and the reason they don't vote is because they don't think it's worth it. They're like, I'm just one person. What difference is it going to make? I have to take time out of my day to go. Maybe I don't even get paid day off. I have to wait in line with no water. All these kind of things.
Mm.
And actually, like it's the missing third. A third of people didn't vote in like the UK election or the US election, and that completely changes results, right?
Mm.
And so when I feel very
Yeah.
what about things that happen, I think about, well, I can disengage or I can show up.
Mm.
And when it comes to impact investing, it is so critical that we keep going. I mean, the UN Sustainable Development Goals are just one framework, right? But it's a pretty impressive framework, and they they call for impact investing. They recognize that impact investing is going to be essential if we are ever to achieve the 2030, or what is going to end up being the 2050 when they refresh the framework.
Mm.
Um, and it's because private capital needs to be channeled, and we can't just wait for the the higher ups or people who can afford a wealth manager, or institutional investors or pension funds to think about these things. What about you and I? What about me? Like, what about us? We've got private capital. We've
Mm.
it's not much, but together it's quite a lot actually. And if we can build things that are more accessible to the everyday person, it's like philanthropy, right? Sure, there are major donors, but also I've had £10 monthly subscriptions for things, and so have a lot of my friends. And how does it all add up?
Mm.
And in such a global world, um, whether you travel, whether you live where you grew up and you'll die where you grew up, um, we're all global citizens because we're all affected and participate in a global economy.
Yeah.
Obviously, some countries, your participation in a global economy is far lesser, as an individual, but your impact by the way that you are impacted by the global economy is still felt because of the way it's built. So I think about it like that. We're all global citizens, so we all have an opportunity to participate in shaping the globe and
Mm.
the way that we want to see the world moving forwards, to be more equal, prosperous, sustainable, all these kind of things.
Mm.
So yeah, I feel really passionate about it being part of the solution, but it involves a lot of democracy,
Yeah.
and respect of democracy too. Well, of all the tools, every time I ever speak about whether it's inclusive finance, whether it's sustainable investing, whatever it is, and at the end of the panel or the article, you have to think about what's the take home message. The thing I always say is that financial and political literacy are the two most powerful things you can do to make a change. Like that, you can do that today. You can start building
Mm.
and enhancing that today. And the moment you start to increase that, you start to increase the power that you can yield in the world.
True. Yes. I feel so inspired by listening to you. I just want to go find something to read or something, something to learn.
Mm, mm.
So, but so zooming out, beyond finance, you can include finance, but beyond that, what gives you hope about the future that we're building? And what role do you think that you have mentioned it already? But what kind of roles can we all play in this future?
Okay, so I'm going to say two things that will kind of seem like they contradict each other. Um,
Okay.
I keep saying, oh, I'm really passionate about X, but I tend not to say things that I don't feel really strongly about. So here are two more things I'm very passionate about. Um, and what I see in terms of roles for the future is that this is intergenerational. I
Yeah.
really despise when people say that my generation and the one after me is going to save the world.
Mm.
Because I'm Gen Z or Gen Z, and the oldest person who is Gen Z is 30. How
Yeah.
many people in decision-making roles with, a good stack of wealth behind them are under 30?
Mm.
Really not that many. I'm sure, you can name a few poster children, but it's really not that many. The people who hold power and decision making right now are not my generation or the one younger.
Mm.
So in building the future that we want to see and want to have, it is an intergenerational conversation, and we need to respect the upstream and downstream sharing of knowledge. There are elder generations, especially those that are pre-industrialization or pre-plastic in the industrialized world, but in non-industrialized world or becoming, those older
Mm.
generations and the wisdom and the knowledge. There's First Nations and Indigenous knowledge as well, if you think about elder generations of just humanity.
Mm.
But also, you know, even within my generation, my sister is 8 years younger than me, and got two brothers in the middle there too. And we're all Gen Z, but we have grown up in a completely different tech generation.
Mm.
How we interact with the world is completely different. And it means that in order to understand how I could instill passion, values, drive in someone who is just 16 or 17 right now, has got to be a completely different approach to somebody who was growing up in the tech relationship that I had when I was
Mm.
16 or 17. And it's changing so much more rapidly than just these 15-year groups of what we call generations. Um, so that's what I think is really key for all of our role, is to recognize that we have to have conversations up and down age groups, and
Mm.
recognize where we hold power right now, how we can advocate for those who don't have power up and down age groups, um, as well as just intersectionally in general. But that's really important because you know uh, at COP, there's a youth day, right? And it's only youth that attend the youth day events. It's not the older groups that
Mm.
make decisions for youth. Like,
Right. Right.
or if it is older people, like decision makers, it's only associated in the education space, like people who work at
Mm.
universities or NGOs that have youth beneficiaries. It's not the CEO of a corporation who sells to youth
Mm.
consumers.
Mm.
Um, that's really what I see for the role. But conversely, which might now seem like a contradiction to what I said about my generation isn't the one that's going to save everyone, we're all going to save us, is that what gives me hope is the great wealth transfer.
Right.
um, because Gen Z and millennials as well, Gen Z and millennials, and we're yet to see for what happens for Gen Alpha regarding wealth transfer, but our generations are going to experience the greatest wealth transfer in history because of how economies have grown and the way that cost of living has gone up and gone down, and all of this kind of stuff. It means that we're going to inherit more than any other generation has inherited before. And what's different about our generations to the ones before is the way that we make decisions. That we're so values led
Mm.
that the world is not going to know what to do when suddenly the most values driven generation holds the most wealth. And for the first time ever, women are going to hold more than 50% of the world's wealth, of all money in the world.
Oh.
So, what's going to happen to economies when women actually have a stake in the world now? Not just,
Yeah.
organizing household budgets, but actual decision making power.
Mm.
And that's what really gives me hope, because even if all this chaos happens between now and the time we start, and the wealth transfers started, right? Millennials are the generation up. And women are inheriting, and that's also with changes of law and this kind of thing. Women gaining access to a bank account for the first time, that's really advancing. Land ownership rights, it's still far behind than it should be, but it's moving. But it's really going to change the game, because when women are in charge of money, communities are lifted. And so what happens when most of the world's money is held by women? The world will be lifted. So that's really what gives me hope as well, and part of why I'm on this big mission of like financial literacy, especially on the impact investing side, because the financial advisors and wealth managers and just people who work in finance that provide services, they're going to have to know how to do this in order to serve us, because we don't take subpar performance at all. I mean, just we hold our governments to account, we hold corporations to account, and when things are not being done properly, we take action ourselves. So it's a real opportunity for the world of finance and corporations and business to be ready for that, and to start now. But else they will be left behind, and we'll just create our own funds. I mean, it's happening already. There are funds being made by Gen Z and millennials because don't like the way other people are doing it, and they're missing out if they don't keep up. So yeah, two kind of opposing points, but they kind of match.
Yeah, but I see what you mean. And I didn't know this about the wealth transfer, and especially the part about women. That is really interesting. Yeah, looking forward to that.
Yeah, I can't wait as a Gen Z woman.
Yes, absolutely. I can see that. And because today, I mean, the news are not exactly covered with women in power, like the news that we see that are most like frequent these days. So yeah, interesting shift. I'm afraid we have to wrap up. I could listen to you for hours. It's so interesting and so inspiring to listen to you. And you give me hope. That is for sure. So thank you so much for all your knowledge and everything that you do. And you're definitely a guest that I think having you back like just a few months down the line, and you would have done like 1,000 more new things. So we could do that.
Yeah. And thank you for giving me space to speak about my passions.
Yeah, you're welcome. So nice to have you. Thank you so much. Wow, was that something, or what do you think? I am actually beyond impressed. I really hope that you, like I do, feel both a little bit smarter and more hopeful after talking to Holly. I think she managed to make the world of finance feel, well, a little bit more human, perhaps. And it's a really important reminder that money isn't the enemy, it's a tool. And when values-led people get their hands on that tool, that's when real change happens. If you want to connect with Holly or keep up with her work, I've put some links in the show notes. And if you enjoyed this episode, it would be really helpful if you would leave a review on your podcast player, and maybe also share it with somebody that you think can benefit from listening to it. And also, if you want more of everything happening behind the scenes, more writing and other good stuff coming your way very soon, go to my Substack and sign up there to receive all the news. As always, thanks for listening. I'll see you next time, same place, different story.